September of last year, Azerbaijan launched a military offensive in the breakaway region of Nagorno-Karabakh. Within 24 hours, the separatist ethnic Armenian forces surrendered and agreed to a Russian proposal for a ceasefire. The self-declared Republic of Artsakh dissolved itself and formally ceased to exist by January 1st of 2024. By the end of September, nearly the whole of Armenian population had left Nagorno-Karabakh. So now, Nikol Pashinian, Prime Minister of Armenia, is facing internal and external challenges and looking for new allies. To discuss the current situation in Armenia, I'm joined by my next guest, Raffi Elliott, Yerevan-based political risk analyst. Good morning, sir. Great having you on.
Good morning. Have a wonderful Sunday. Thanks for having me.
So let me start perhaps with Nikol Pashinyan and some of the problems he's facing. One of these problems has a name, I believe, Bagrat Gastanyan, if I'm not mistaken. Could you explain the situation here?
Correct. So since Nikol Pashinyan himself was brought to the prime ministership following the 2018 peaceful transition of power that Armenia is now called the Velvet Revolution, he's also widely seen as associated with the defeat to Azerbaijani forces in November of 2020. And since that ceasefire was signed, every year he's faced some kind of major challenge to his premiership, usually in the form of street protests organized by the opposition. This latest round has been organized, or at least unified, under this Armenian archbishop called Bagrat Gastanyan, who is the archbishop for the region of Tavush, which is an Armenian region that borders Azerbaijan. And many of the villages in that region are concerned because of an ongoing border demarcation process that is seen as a prelude to eventually signing a peace treaty with Azerbaijan. And there's many who are concerned that Nikol Pashinyan may be ready to sacrifice too much, or at least compromise too much, for the sake of a peace treaty. And Bagrat Gastanyan, or the Sirpazan, who has asked the Armenian Catholicos, who's our equivalent of the Pope, he's asked him to be relieved of his religious duties while he's leading this movement. And he's actually declared himself to be a candidate for prime minister. And he's hoping to force the Armenian National Assembly to call a vote of non-confidence against the prime minister and then have new elections. However, that's very unlikely to happen, given that the prime minister's party has more than 50% of the seats in parliament at the moment.
All right, so Pashinyan is being accused of being too lenient and sort of making too many concessions. But what are some of his options? Because he does not have Russian support. We've just saw that with what happened in Nagorno-Karabakh. His relationship, Armenia's relationship with Turkey, the diplomatic relations are formally non-existent, if I'm not mistaken.
Non-existent, correct.
So what is he to do?
With one exception, incidentally, is that Armenia and Turkey are both members of the Black Sea Initiative Group, which is the only unofficial diplomatic relationship that Turkey and Armenia hold.
Right. So who he can turn to? I mean, which country? What can he do? Where is he supposed to seek support?
So, as you very correctly stated, Armenia's relationship with Russia, which was primarily a security relationship built on top of a smokescreen of historical friendship between nations, are both Armenia and Russia being Orthodox countries. And I think a lot of people assume that that would be enough to garner Russian support. However, Russia, of course, has been supporting both sides militarily, both before and after the war. There's a common saying in this region that in the conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia, Russia supports the conflict. And however, Russia also does not see Armenia as a policy priority for itself, given its recent invasion of Ukraine and the shift in its own military capabilities. Therefore, despite being an official ally of Armenia, Russia has now become way more dependent economically and diplomatically on Turkey, and Turkey's very close ally, Azerbaijan. So Armenia can no longer rely on its officially signed treaties and the word of the president of Russia, which has forced Armenia to democratize its foreign policy, both militarily and just in terms of official support. So in terms of rebuilding its military following the 2020 war, Armenia has relied a lot on a new ally, India, and also France. Within the European Union in general, I think the EU has been very supportive of Armenia's pro-democracy reforms over the last 6 years, and they have seen the cost that Armenia paid for this, which is the war and the loss of support from Russia for a country that is otherwise surrounded by enemies. And there has been increasing support coming from Brussels, but even within the European family, France has shown itself to be a major supporter of Armenia, both diplomatically and now militarily, with the recent official announcement that Armenia is buying a number of Caesar self-propelled artillery systems from the French, which will potentially be a game changer militarily. And also, in general, for Armenia right now, the purpose is to try to solve its diplomatic issues on all fronts, and that includes Turkey and Azerbaijan, with the assumption that that might reduce the possibility of an extra war.
Right. So, sort of, what steps can Armenia take in order to improve its relationship with Turkey? Because, as you rightly pointed out, it is a crucial country, right? Because it has a strong relationship with Russia, and well, if they manage to patch up their differences, perhaps it could be very helpful, right? But I'm not sure. Would that be, and if so, how they should go about it?
That's a good point. I mean, Armenia's opportunities to normalize relations with Turkey have, in the last decade or so, actually been shrinking as the government of Turkey under Erdogan consolidates towards a more authoritarian and nostalgically imperialist sort of state. Therefore, it's also an imperative for Armenia to find some way to normalize relations. Of course, for Armenia, a big impediment to it is that Turkey is the perpetrator of the 1915 Armenian genocide, in which 1.5 million Armenians were murdered and another million or so were displaced, forming the majority of the diaspora communities we know about. And another major impediment is that Turkey is currently blockading Armenia in solidarity with Azerbaijan. And for Armenia, the game has been to dislocate Turkey's foreign policy towards Armenia from Azerbaijan's, because at the moment, Turkey essentially subcontracts its foreign policy to Armenia to Baku. And the Turks have, on occasion, attempted to sign some form of normalization with the Armenians, most notably in 2008, when they signed but then did not ratify the protocols for normalizations, which we call today the football diplomacy era, in which the Armenian and Turkish presidents visited each other's countries for respective soccer games. And that eventually did not go anywhere, mostly because it was torpedoed by Azerbaijan. And this has continued until recently. Most recently, at the beginning of last year, Turkey and Armenia had agreed to open their land border, which has been closed since 1993, to third-party nationals, meaning non-Turkish, non-Armenians who would like to cross the border. Armenia actually revamped its border facilities and built new customs facilities for this purpose, and Turkey has still not actually taken any step in that direction. So it's a very complex procedure, and Turkey has recently formally claimed that it will not move forward with any diplomatic relations with Armenia until Armenia and Azerbaijan sign a peace treaty. But Azerbaijan, of course, will do everything possible to lengthen the process of signing this peace treaty. They will continuously find reasons to accuse Armenia of being a non-honest negotiator. Most recently, the Azerbaijani president insisted that there could be no peace treaty until Armenia literally changes its constitution, which is an impossible ask.
Right. It does seem indeed quite complicated, but perhaps if Armenia manages to the cozying up towards the EU, that could be a bargaining chip, because, of course, Turkey still wants to be a part of the EU, and it has been taking them years and years, right? So perhaps there's hope there. One last question. Are we expecting any political changes within Armenia? You said that probably not, right? If I'm not mistaken, that Galstanian and his
Correct. If you're referring to the protest movement, I do not think that the government sees them as a serious, immediate challenge. That doesn't mean, of course, that there is no influence whatsoever on the political process. It does act as a reminder to the leadership in Armenia that there is still widespread anger in the country, even if that hasn't been consolidated under this opposition movement. It's a reminder to the government that the Armenian people will only tolerate so much when it comes to concessions, and that will help bolster Armenia as it continues its negotiation process. There are elections scheduled for 2026, however, parliamentary elections. Keep in mind, Armenia is a parliamentary republic. And so it is likely that between now and then, other political forces consolidate and will try to challenge the prime minister. However, in the meantime, Armenia is now openly mulling an application for EU candidate status like Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova, which would be a game changer for Armenian politics as well.
Raffi Elliott, thank you, sir, for your time and for these important insights. Very much appreciated and very informative. Thank you.